you doing? I can't believe I caught you again. You know, Jesus doesn't approve of this little habit of yours.
I know, baby, I know it's wrong, but it feels so right.
Well, it ain't.
But I've been doing it since I was 12 years old.
It's nothing but a sinful perversion of nature, if you ask me.
But baby, I don't ever want to stop looking at tech websites, new gadgets, video games, software, or any of that stuff.
Well, then I'm leaving.
Okay. Bye.
Pick of the week.
It is time for Pick of the Week, where I get to pretty much geek out. And I've recently heard that there's other people, including people in the podcast or radio biz, that would like to geek out with me. And I will give everybody their chance. So admittedly, right now, I'm at a point in my life where I'm incredibly busy trying to get to, so that I can get to a point where I'm no longer that busy. But anyway, there it is. And I would love to geek out with all of you. So, honestly, if you want to be a guest on the show, send me an email, sovereigntech@hush.ai. I mean, and I'll see if I can't fit you in, even though I've got quite a few people lined up that I'm going to be having on in the near future. So anyway, but hey, it doesn't hurt to ask, right? And we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. Sovereign Tech is all over the board. So, which is how I like it. All over the board. Anyway, this week I want to talk about something that boy, I'm not even sure how to lead into this. There seems to be this aura going around that apparently for a while Star Wars wasn't cool to be into. For, say, the past since 1999. It was not cool to be into Star Wars. And I inherently disagree. I've always been into Star Wars. I have consumed pretty much every possible piece of Star Wars fiction, information, whatever that's out there. I am a veritable walking holocron. And if you're a Star Wars fan, you know what that is, of knowledge when it comes to Star Wars. So now I am not to do a pick of the week on Star Wars would, almost be ridiculous. I'd need, 10 hours to do that. But there's something I want to concentrate on that I really found enjoyable, because everybody's very, very excited right now because Disney, and I've talked about this on the show before, Disney, now owns Star Wars. They bought it off of George Lucas for $4 billion and some other options. And they are saying they're going to make 7, 8, and 9, along with a bunch of other films, including films that may take place in between. They've got, Harrison Ford's coming back. All the actors are coming back, anyone that's alive anyway. And it's all very, very exciting. And everybody's like, okay, yeah, we can be into Star Wars again, because now Lucas isn't running the show. And Lucas, apparently was screwing everything up. Well, I disagree. I don't think Lucas was always screwing everything up. I'll lay this tidbit out on you, and maybe you can ask me about this and I'll do it for like a listener email. I don't think George Lucas created Star Wars. I think Alan Dean Foster did. And I think there's a lot of proof for that. I also would agree that George Lucas has never made Star Wars great. In fact, the first episode 4, A New Hope, the original Star Wars film from 1977, isn't that great a movie, in my opinion. It's groundbreaking. I understand that, but I don't think it's that great of a film. That said, okay, yeah, well then who made it great? Well, I'll tell you who made it great. Erwin Kershner made things great with Empire Strikes Back. But why was Return of the Jedi still great? Because the director, Richard Marquand wasn't the greatest. Really, the guy that made it all great is Lawrence Kasdan. And credit to Disney, they hired back Lawrence Kasdan, to write more. More Star Wars. He's also responsible, I think, for making Indiana Jones great too. But anyway, with all this in mind, all this stuff happening in between, and the return of trilogy characters, original trilogy characters like Luke Skywalker and Han Solo and all this, there was a time, in the 90s. Now, you have to bear in mind, when Timothy Zahn, there was like I was barely conscious, meaning I was like 7 or 8, when there was a time frame where like Star Wars just wasn't even on the map. Okay. And it wasn't until Timothy Zahn in the early 90s came out with his Thrawn trilogy, as in Grand Admiral Thrawn, that Star Wars finally like came back. And it came back, and that, Dark Horse also did their Dark Empire trilogy, which that was huge. And so the comic books and the novels, really made Star Wars a thing again. And that's probably what convinced George Lucas, along with his, his divorce term ending, around 98, that got him to start making movies again, because he realized, oh, hey, I can still make money off of this. So anyway, so the novels were probably the biggest thing, though, in the 90s that really, and video games, like the computer games at the time, like X-Wing and TIE Fighter were amazing. That was a big deal, too. So George Lucas had the incredible idea. I give him, and I think he deserves the credit for this. In 1996, he made what was called an interquel. Now, well, he didn't make it. He had Steve Perry write it, and I don't think it was really his story at all. But it was his idea to do kind of like this multimedia Star Wars event. And they called it Shadows of the Empire. Okay? And a lot of people know it for different things. Some people know it for the comics. Some people know it for the great Nintendo 64 game, as well as PC. But a great Nintendo 64 game, which it is like the second or third best-selling Nintendo 64 game ever. I think it was a launch title even. Also, the novel by Steve Perry, not the singer for Journey, but Steve Perry. It also, there was a soundtrack for it done by Joel McNeely. I mean, they made this. This really was a Star Wars event. Okay. They made sure, like, anything that would exist for a normal Star Wars movie, they put out there. There was even action figures. There's just all this stuff. The branding machine that Star Wars had going, or the merchandising machine that Star Wars had going on, went full bore with Shadows of the Empire. Not as bad as it did with Episode 1, but it was out there. I mean, and if you wanted Shadows of the Empire stuff, it was there. And so for something so big with so much exposure and so much going on in 1996, again, this is 3 years before Episode 1 would come out, and intriguingly, at the time, it was really the first time you could ever read more about Darth Vader. Because anything licensed by Lucasfilm at the time all took place after Return of the Jedi, or maybe briefly before. But either way, it never, ever touched on the character of Darth Vader, which for many people is their favorite character of Star Wars. And I can totally understand that. And so Shadows of the Empire, did it live up? Was it that good? Did all this really work? In my opinion, yeah. There were some people who thought that it was like overhyped. I thought it was incredible. The video game was great. I still play it on PC. It's a great time. The comic book was really good, and the novel was amazing. I thought, even though it's very, very short. But the point is that all these different the multimedia event that it was, each part was supposed to get the complete story of Shadows of the Empire. You had to do each one. You had to read the comic. You had to play the game on the hard setting at that to get the actual ending where Dash Rendar, and I'll stop there. And you had to read the book, to get this like real complete exposure. My favorite part of it was the novel, admittedly. I enjoyed, like I said, Darth Vader was in it. And with that in mind, it had this, like, I think it was the very opening sequence of the book where Darth Vader is he's using the Force and he's trying to heal himself. His scarred body that we all know now he has. And in so doing, when he can suddenly breathe without needing, that suit, because his lungs or whatever are messed up, he suddenly feels happy and he loses control over the dark side, and then he just gets angry and he goes back to being Darth Vader. But it's a really, really powerful thing to read about such a tragic character. I love it. It's great. Also, Shadows of the Empire actually introduces what may be one of my favorite characters, if not my favorite character of the Star Wars saga. Of course, I guess it's debatable with Disney if all this stuff is still going to be considered quote-unquote canon, meaning, did this actually happen in that universe according to what's officially licensed? Prince Shizor, or at the time I called him Zizzer because, I didn't know really how to pronounce it. But then the book kind of had this scene with his chair where the chair is talking to him and it can't pronounce his name properly. So it spells it out. It says Shizor. And anyway, I love Prince Shizor. He's this character, a reptilian race. He's a Feline, and he's a tragic character too, in that, you find out that really he's jealous of Darth Vader and his position with the Emperor. He hates the fact that the Emperor kind of wiped out his species, so he kind of has a vendetta against the Emperor in a way, which is really, really interesting. He also has this really hot human replica droid called an HRD, meaning it's a droid that looks exactly like a woman, or it looks exactly like a human, and you can't really tell the difference, and her name is Guri. And which is really cool because it talks about scenes, where she's protecting him. So she's really strong and badass. But at the same time, there's times where, Shizor, is horny and the book mentions, and this was the great thing about the book too, is one of the first times where Star Wars openly admitted that people had sex other than, there's babies being born. And he talks about how he'd be with Guri in the hot tub, which I thought was, fabulous. Very, very sexy. I very much enjoyed that as being a 15-year-old in 1996. So, it had that. He was a really cool character. Unfortunately, not much else has ever been done with Shizor except for a couple other books, but that's because, the character's not around. And it introduces kind of a, like the CD, like Shizor's the head of the Black Sun criminal organization, and that's kind of, it's like the CD, black market kind of thing, which that was cool too. Was that, it added a lot of underground to Star Wars, which was cool. The comic book did that a lot too, because it's all about like Boba Fett, or about Lando and Chewie, kind of hunting down Boba Fett to try and get Han Solo back. So because all this takes place between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, which is exciting in itself because, again, nothing ever took place during that time. In the 90s in Star Wars. We just had no idea what was going on. So that made it all very exciting. And so now the reason I'm talking about this for Pick of the Week is because, if you're dying to get some Star Wars, you're starting to feel the hype, from all the advertising. And again, it's only a couple of years away. 2015 is when the new Star Wars movies are supposed to start coming out. And then they're going to come out from every year after that, according to Disney. If you're hungry for some really, really good Star Wars, entertainment that's out there, you really can't beat this experience because, again, there's so many ways to take it in. You can read the comic, you can read the great novel by Steve Perry, you can play the great video game, you can go to Pirate Bay, you can download it. Nobody's going to make money off of buying this anymore. I mean, the game's just, it's gone, so you might as well download it. Go ahead. And not that I'd have a problem with you downloading it anyway, whether or not someone made money off of it or not. But Shadows of the Empire, I mean, just there's so much to enjoy. Now, the soundtrack too that Joel McNeely did was phenomenal. It's kind of a rarer piece of Star Wars music, and if you've never heard it, I totally recommend checking that out. I think there's 2 tracks on it, or 3 tracks on it that I really, really enjoy, which actually brings up one of my favorite scenes of the book as well. There's the 3 tracks are, I want to say it's Night Skies, which is really, really good. And then there's also Prince Shizor's theme, which is, a really classy kind of theme. I mean, it's cool how it comes out. And then there's a track called The Seduction of Princess Leia. And yes, that happens in the book. It doesn't go as far as perhaps I would have liked. But then, of course, Prince Shizor being a Feline, he can kind of give off these pheromones that can attract mates. Which happens in nature. I mean, Steve Perry didn't really come up with that on his own. I mean, creatures do, and theoretically, humans actually excrete pheromones. Just, we don't choose it. I guess that's the difference, is that, the Phaline, the species Phaline, can actually choose to excrete this pheromone. And he's having a meeting with Princess Leia, and he's trying to seduce her. And again, very, very exciting, because here it is, Star Wars, the cleanest of the clean, with George Lucas having his way. Hopefully Disney will do better. The cleanest of the clean, coming right out and saying, sex happens in this universe, baby. And that was awesome. That alone is worth the price of admission with Shadows of the Empire. There's cool characters too. Dash Rendar is a really cool character when you play the video game. You even get a little bit of scenes with Han Solo, which at the time in '96 was awesome. But it's still a great read all around, still a great experience. The soundtrack is awesome. The game is awesome. Like I said, the comic's good. It's all Boba Fett, and if you love Boba Fett, go for it. It's just all great. Anyway, Star Wars Shadows of the Empire. If you're looking to just whet your appetite for Star Wars, I recommend starting there before these movies come out. You've been listening to Sovryn Tech. I'll catch you next week. Until then, Carpe Lucem. See you later.
This has been Sovryn Tech. Visit us at sovryntech.com. That's SOVRYN tech.com. There you can connect with us, see more of what you've heard on today's show, and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is open source. We encourage you to share. Later, nerds.